Hi, I'm Allie Jackson Jolly with Forbes. Today I'm joined by Kathy Chaney, who is the VP of Print for the National Association of Black Journalists. She's also the executive editor for YR Media. And as a point of interest, she began her career as a Forbes intern. So I'm just going to jump right in. Part of the reason I wanted to have you here today was because we're approaching May 25th, which will mark 3 years since, under COVID lockdown, we all sat glued to our devices as we watched George Floyd's murder. And our industry, which is the media industry, made pledges to do better, to create newsrooms that looked more like America and society. So my first question to you, how are we doing?
We are doing okay. I think in the first year and a half, going up to 2 years after his murder, we were kind of making strides in the newsroom where we were being a little bit more conscious of, how we were putting out the news, the nuances of situations like that, and just being really empathetic, and sensitive to the nature of those types of stories and how sorely diversity in the newsroom was needed. And I think as we moved out of year two, going into year three, we're seeing a lot of, I don't want to say change, but there's been a shift where there have been positions that were created within newsrooms to make sure that they focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts within newsrooms. And that was a good thing. But then you began to wonder, as some outlets are closing up those beats, they're taking away those positions. Were they all just for show? Was it just a trendy thing to do? So it's disappointing to see, because you have race teams at some outlets that have just completely been disbanded, So we're doing okay. I'm hoping that the newsrooms that have closed those beats, taken away those positions, are continuing to do the work without having the title of, the race justice, social justice team or something like that. I'm hoping that the work is going to continue and our efforts have not just been wasted.
So you touched on something that you and I had a brief conversation about, and that is when newsrooms and media companies try to close that gap by creating diversity beats. Often it is Black and brown and people from marginalized communities who are put in those beats. And then there's something that you said you've noticed, I've noticed as well, which is a bit of fatigue, which is, I think Black journalists sometimes will express that they feel it's their duty to be the voice of the Black community and sometimes an otherwise non-diverse newsroom, but that leads to burnout. And so would you tell me, in your role as YR Media, you're working with training the next generation of Black and brown journalists. What do how do we fix that? How do we make sure that we're not burning out our Black journalists?
I think the easiest thing to do is to take a step back and put yourself in those shoes. Think of yourself as that emerging journalist now, versus then, the lessons that you've learned, what things burnt you out, and then just make sure that you're telling your reporters, just pay attention to your time, take a moment. I know that we're in the business of, we want to get things out first, but you need to be accurate, but you also need to, you have that empathy. I think journalists, especially the veterans, we're so into the, I can't show emotions. Of course, your opinion is not included in anything, but you're still human. So make sure that you're bringing your authentic self to work with you, but not to overload yourself. Know your limits. Don't stretch yourself thin. And, I always tell my reporters, please don't suffer in silence. If you need some help, speak up. Don't try to soldier through it all and say, oh, I can do this, I can handle this. Just say, hey, give me one moment. And I can understand that, but don't suffer in silence. Don't take on too much more than you can handle. And I know that some newsrooms, some editors, they've grown up in the industry where it's the, I can handle everything. I have to do more with less. I have to keep pushing at it, keep pushing at it. And I just have to do it all right now. You know, some things can't wait until tomorrow. When you have to tell yourself, no, it really can wait till tomorrow. I need to take a break. Even if it's 15 minutes. If you're doing a lunch, you're going on lunch. Eat your lunch, put your phone down, don't think of anything else. If you're going to go sit by yourself, but I know it's easier said than done. A lot of us have that, well, we'll work through lunch thing, but I think it's critical to set those boundaries for yourself. And you can do it in a very healthy way. And then also to help with burnout, it's something that I've had to learn to do, that I've just come out of doing over the last, let's say, 3 years, is if I'm off, I'm off. I'm not paying attention to the news because I will get sucked back into, oh, let me find out what's going on. Let me check in and make sure that they have this tip, or I'm fielding tips. You've got to be off. When you are off, please disconnect. I mean, it definitely helps with burnout. And as long as you're carrying your load, just make sure that you are taking care of yourself. That's just like the easiest thing to do, but don't feel like you have to be on 24/7 because the news is on 24/7.
Yeah, that's right. Well, how about you talked about the economy and media, the fact that we've seen a bunch of layoffs recently. We've also seen a bunch of closures. I think the most recent one I saw was BuzzFeed News closing its doors. How do you think that this is going to impact Black-owned media companies? Is it going to be disproportionate, or is there some opportunity there?
Oh, when we talk about the Black press, Black media, I have a love for it because about half of my career has been in the Black press, various outlets. So my affinity for it is enormous. I have always felt that traditional Black media, they limit themselves because they say they have limited resources. And over the last 10 to 15 years, you really can do a lot with what you have. You can do a lot with an iPhone. So it's not about having limited resources, it's how effective you are with the resources that you have. I think this is prime time for the Black media to really own its space and crowd other spaces. I know that we've seen a rise in Black-owned media coming up. We have The Tribe, we have Capital B, I'm forgetting a few others, but I mean, there's been a rise in Black-owned media, and I think it's like a resurgence that's been much needed. They're branching out into other cities where they're covering everything and they're doing it well. They're really not stepping on the toes of mainstream media, but they're making mainstream media pay attention, and that is what is needed. So I think it's prime time for them to really, really own the space again and never let it go. The voice is needed, and we need the Black press, but we need them to make sure that they have the resources at their fingertips. Even if it's just an iPhone, you can do a podcast, you can do video, you can edit on your iPhone, you can do everything on your iPhone. So there is no, you need a big studio to do this, or you need someone else to do this. You can do a lot with what you have at your fingertips.
Yeah. And can you describe, you said you think that the opportunity is for Black media to crowd their space. Can you just, when you say that, what do you mean?
I mean, they need to own it. Everything that you see is mostly mainstream media. You get and I don't want to call the Black press alternative news, but some people will call it alternative news. You get the other side of the coin with the Black press, or let's just say ethnic media. And I think that really need to own the space and say, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. I need to be included in everything. You make them include you. You know, you continue to cover the hard-hitting stories that are affecting your community. You do it from that nuance that no one else can do, where mainstream media has no choice but to pay attention, but to credit you when they're picking up that story and trying to do it on their own. You own that space. Just, you know, we're here. This is what you need to be paying attention to. If you're covering it from an institutional angle, which is boring, which is, okay, this official said this official said that, and according to law enforcement or whatever it is. No, you have your ethnic media, you have your Black-owned media that's really got their boots on the ground, and they're covering the stories. You know, they're not parachuting reporters into neighborhoods to cover XYZ and then they're gone. And then let's say a year later, the community sees that reporter again because they've been parachuted in. There's no connection made or anything like that. So when I say the Black-owned media, ethnic media needs to own their space, it's own it. You know, let the community know we are here. We're here every day. We're covering the good, the bad, the ugly. We're covering it all. We are owning this space for you.
Yeah, I love that. And so how about, since we're talking about ownership, let's talk about BET. BET hasn't been Black owned since 2001. Paramount is now exploring the idea of selling, and there's some Black wealth owners, Black wealth creators who are looking to step in. I think I've heard Tyler Perry, I've heard Byron Allen, the founders of Group Black. So talk to me about BET having the opportunity to be Black owned again.
I think it's a wonderful opportunity. And I'll say I'm a media snob. I'm a news snob. So I appreciate when you have people leading media companies who have the experience of being in the media, who've, you know, they've done interviews, they've been on the ground, they've written. So I don't have an issue with owners who have not been in this space before. If we need your money to, you know, make this company Black owned, that's great. However, what I would like is for them to put the right people in place to lead these companies who have the media experience. And when I say have the media experience, it's not they've worked, they were the sales manager at whatever newspaper or whatever TV station, you know, you've worked in media, yes, but I need you to have had some journalism experience and have actually had to practice the craft. That's what I would like to see. You know, if BT is Black owned again, just the people at the top that are making the decisions, because everything filters down, I need for them to have that journalism experience. That is what I think would make the difference. I mean, I think we've seen some things in the past where XYZ buys XYZ, and it lasts just for a little bit, but the wrong people at the top, and then it falters, and that's just it. I think the success of any media organization is that that top tier has to have that media experience, journalism experience, bona fide journalism experience.
So let's talk about your role. And I think there's two important things about your role. I have been with you in person when young journalists, I wouldn't say they treat you like a celebrity, but something adjacent to that. It's important, you are important to them. And I have a colleague who says, you can't be what you can't see. Now, I think that maybe it's hard to be what you can't see. And so let's talk about how do we create more Kathy Chaneys? How do we make sure that when you and I are ready to hang up the pencil, hang up the pen, hang up the recorder, that there's going to be somebody, and there's going to be lots of somebodies who can go in and head a media company?
That is what I love about my role at YR. And actually, it started before I was at YR. I was at the Chicago Sun-Times. Actually, every place that I've been, it has been me making sure that I've been mentoring young journalists and, just imparting whatever wisdom that I had in them. And I tell them my only requirement, for me talking to you, letting you shadow me, just giving you any pointers is that you pay it forward. I'm a believer in lift as you climb. And, someone did it for me in my career. And it's just extremely important that we help and nurture our emerging journalists. We give them all the tools that they can, that we're extremely honest with them when they are, on shaky ground. And we're doing what we can to make sure, and I've said it to you, I've said it, plenty of other times before. It's like, at some point we have to retire one day. So when we retire, I want to make sure that I can retire and say, oh, I'm leaving the industry in good hands. I have nothing to worry about, I'm going to feel well rested and I'm just going to sit back and just watch everyone else just flourish, and I think that that's, at this stage in my career, I think that that's what's important for me to do, is to make sure that I'm doing my part to massage those muscles, of our young journalists, to help them rise up, to help them see their potential. And yeah, you can't see, you can't be what you can't see. I'll just tell one quick thing is I was at a career day, and this was so many years ago, and it was in a predominantly Black neighborhood, actually all Black neighborhood, all Black school. And I was the only Black professional there, and it really bothered me. Afterwards, I asked the coordinators, I said, you couldn't find a Black fireman, you couldn't find a Black, interior designer, you couldn't find a Black doctor, you couldn't find a Black, teacher, you couldn't find a Black anybody for these other professions. And it was like, oh, I really didn't think about that. I said, well, I need you to do better next time, because you're in a Black neighborhood, you're at a Black school, all these kids are Black, and I'm the only Black face that they're seeing. I was like, this is just completely unacceptable. And they understood. So like the next week or so after that, I was just getting so many apology emails, and I'm like, don't apologize to me, apologize to those kids and do better next year. So I think it's really critical to see people who look like you if this is the field that you want to go into.
Yeah, I agree. It's all the time we have for now, but I just want to say thank you so much. I know I'm happy that your leadership is there so that the young, hungry, mid-level journalists can see you and they can be what they see. So I really appreciate your leadership.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.